Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. If you guys somehow ended up to this one, it means you liked my first video. Which is odd, considering this channel is literally just going to be about me blabbering for hours at a time, pulling stuff out of air. I really hope that some of it connected with you guys, though. That's what I'm really trying to do here. I know last time I talked a little bit about depression and suicide and cutting and all the things that I personally went through. And I figured today would be a good time to talk about depression's little brother, anxiety. A lot of people think they know what anxiety is. A lot of people think because they got on a stage when they were 12 and their heart fluttered for 2 seconds while they were reading a poem or singing a song at their talent show, that that's what anxiety is. Or if they got nervous at a school spelling bee or for a business proposal. And that's not necessarily what it is. It's a version, I'm gonna say. But a very mild and timid version. It's being nervous. Everybody is sometimes. It just depends on the situation and the person. But what anxiety is for a lot of us, actual anxiety, and I'm not trying to dismiss anybody else or anybody else's feelings, but this is what it's like for me, and I know it's what it's like for a ton of other people out there, especially those struggling with other things like depression and other disorders. Anxiety is a buildup. It's all these emotions that you have in one sitting, and your brain is running 1,000,000 miles an hour going over them, trying to think and settle things and come up with solutions. And when a lot of time for a lot of people, depression will kick in and it'll tell you that all those bad things you're thinking about are right and you'll never amount to anything more. And that would make a lot of people just sad. But for us, our hearts start racing, our palms get sweaty, we get nervous, jittery. It hurts. And I don't mean just emotionally. I mean, I do. But imagine if somebody reached their hand inside of your chest and squeezed on your heartstrings as hard as they could. Obviously, they're attempting to rip it out. And that's what anxiety is. I mean, other than the mental standpoint. You know how it felt when somebody who you loved or you were really close to died? Well, we can work ourselves up to that over nothing. It doesn't actually have to be a death. It doesn't have to be something sad. It could just be all these little things combined being so mentally tainting that it physically hurts. I remember earlier today, my biological father texted me, out of the blue, and he never does. Obviously, he's not present in my life in any way, shape, or form. He's never really tried, and he doesn't really care. Which, you do you, I'll do me. That's fine. But he texted me, and I got this flush feeling of not knowing what to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Half of me wanted to laugh on how stupid it was that he was even trying to contact me. Another half wanted to say, "Hi, where have you been?" Then another part of me wanted to tell him off. And then another part of me wanted to cry and ask, why weren't you there? And why haven't you been? And why do you only text or call when it's convenient for you? And that's where my headspace was. And as you can see in how I'm telling this, I was kind of working myself up. And that's what we all do. And it's not, this can happen within split seconds. I know a lot of people are going to say and think, well, if you're just working yourself up, just stop overthinking. And if it were that easy, a lot of us would. But it's not necessarily overthinking. A lot of it is connected to past trauma. So if something bad happens that has happened to you in the past and you get really anxious or really nervous or sad and you don't know, it's just, that's how it is. I mean, let's say your abuser of 10 years just got out of prison and you saw him walking down the streets. That would send an immediate rush of emotion to every part of your body. You would probably want to run, scream, cry, yell, get mad, tell him to leave you alone, call the cops, who knows? I mean, it's you. I don't know you. I only know me. But that's kind of how our thought processes go. Anxiety is definitely a tough one to cover. And I'm not saying just talking about it, but there's so many things that go into it. Like PTSD, obviously trauma. Depression has a lot to do with it because they usually are hand in hand with each other. They're the brother and sister, skipping down the road, clinging their hands together, unfortunately. But it also has a lot to do with other disorders too. When you have other mental health stuff going on and it's messing with the way that you're thinking, of course you're going to have anxiety. Of course you're going to be scared. Of course you're going to be nervous. It's all about that fight or flight, If it gets to a certain point to where you're thinking about things, sometimes people's minds just ponder. And that, for me personally, is never good. That's why I always say, well, you left me in a room alone and I started thinking. And that's never a good sign. Because then I start spiraling. And I could be having the best day of my life. And if something comes up to kind of trigger that spiral, then it's at least ruined for the moment, sometimes for the day, depending on how severe I spiraled. Or how long it took me to climb back up that emotional ladder. The one we talked about from last video. Like with that text today. I was having a fairly good day. I was working with one of my favorite bosses, I was helping with her doing prep and all the other things, and then we were just chit-chatting. And me and her, I want to say, are pretty good friends, or at least from my standpoint. And then that text came up. The first thing I did was call my mom. And her solution was to just talk to him, but then I tried, and the only thing he wanted was to visit me in person, because he thought I still lived where I did, because his son was getting his braces done in that same town. Unfortunately, he's one of the kind of people who doesn't really care about his daughters. He only cares to make initiative when it has something to do with his sons, which is sad. And a lot of people are like that. And it's not necessarily just like the sexist thing. Because my stepfather was the same way. He only loved his daughter and not my brothers. So it just depends on the person. It's usually whoever they raised or whoever they think they have a better bond with. But back to anxiety. if you ever think you know what anxiety's like, try to break it down a little bit if you don't know, because it is something you can overcome, and if it's not that severe, it's a lot easier. How it gets severe is when you spiral, and then you spiral, and then you spiral, and spiral, and spiral, and then you have all these things coming at you at once. And then somebody pushes on that ladder. And that's when a lot of people have breakdowns. And breakdowns in itself could be a ton of things. You know, breakdowns could be panic attacks, or crises, or it could be a lot of things in the moment. It can turn into a lot of things. So, obviously, the other video talked about my attempt. And the reason how that started was I spiraled. I was already in a really bad place and had a really bad mindset. And then I thought I was alone and that nobody cared and nobody called and nobody texted, and I was just there. And I was there with all these emotions, all these feelings, and then I was alone. And that wasn't great for me. And that's how my little spiral went. And it wasn't just that. I had 1,000,010 other reasons at the time. Everybody does. And it doesn't have to be that severe either. I mean, some people, when they have mental breakdowns, they sit there and they cry over the smallest thing. You know, because they already have a lot going on. And then they just snap. They yell, they cry, they scream, they break. You know, and they don't want to ask for help. Not a lot of people want to ask for help when they're at their breaking point. They wanted help prior to that. And that is the reason why they are where they are now. Why they're having that little mental break. Because they needed you and you weren't there. And I'm not just talking about you or just whatever and whoever, but it could have been as simple as that, you know? And there's some really strong, and it doesn't matter how weak or strong you consider yourself. The strongest people in the world could break down. Like my mom, we've been in a really tough situation for a really long time, and then she has my 2 brothers on top of it, and we have no financial balance whatsoever. So every once in a while she'll break down, and she doesn't want you to see it. She doesn't want you to see her cry. She always hides it. She keeps it to herself. She doesn't want you to talk to her or help her. She wanted help, you know, when she was struggling, and she's still struggling. But I'm trying my best. I'm trying to go to school. I'm trying to pay the bills. Or some of them. You know, what I can with my very, very limited job. But I'm trying to move on to better things so that we as a family can move on to better things. Because even though I'm 18 and most teenagers would just be thinking about themselves, I can't let go. Not right now. I mean, I could, and I know I could. And if I really put my mind to it, I could do things on my own. And it's not the fact that I'm alone that I'm afraid of. It's the fact of leaving her alone. And I know, Mom, when you hear this, you're going to say, well, I don't really need you to be here. And I don't really need help. Because you're a strong, independent woman, and I know you can do it by yourself. But I know somewhere deep down inside of you, you want it. You want help. You want me around. Or at least I hope so. Not keeping my fingers crossed, though. I've heard a lot worse, to be fair. But sometimes those strong people in your life, they're hiding something. They're hiding their struggle. And a lot of people do that. Before, if you would have saw me, you would have thought I was just a moody teenager who was going through a phase in their life, their emo phase or whatever. But I never let anything show. I take this after my beautiful mother. I never cry in front of anybody. And when I do, it's because I'm having a hard time keeping it inside because of that anxiety. There are some points where you just whirlpool and all this energy is building up inside of you from that whirlpool. And you just snap. Just imagine one of those, what are they called? You know how some people in old days had those little wheel well spinny things that transported water to power. Imagine it's one of those, and you have a rapid tide slowly turning into a typhoon, and the river is just blowing through, and all of a sudden the tension gives out on that power source, and it breaks and it shatters, and then no more power, and then they have to go, and they have to wait until the storm is calmed. They have to wait until everything's okay again, and then they have to rebuild from scratch. And that's exactly what anxiety is like. It is a typhoon that overwhelms you to the point of breaking. And this slow build-up from it being a slight ripple in the water to the typhoon inside of you can take years. It can take decades. It could take somebody's whole life before they snap. There are 1,025,000 things that could cause it. And I guarantee you, they've already been through that 1,025,000 things. And they're working on their 7,000th. There is just too many things to count. And that's why people explode. And that's why people have anxiety. It's because they have just too much going on at once. And a lot of people are scared of that feeling. And they're scared of failure. They're scared of what might happen. They might be scared of what's happened and what might happen because of it. Or they're scared of repeating. Personally, I have had quite a few handfuls of really bad people, walk through my life and tear me up and chew me up and spit me out, the whole 9 yards. And that's personally given me a lot of trust issues and a lot of trauma. And depending on the thing, because of PTSD and all the things, you get little flashbacks of how it happened and how it laid out. And then, for me personally, I'll flinch really, really bad. And people are always like, why the hell are you flinching? Were you beaten as a child? It's like, no, I wasn't. I just have some really, really bad memories. And some of them were physical. Don't come out from my mother. She's fantastic. But there's some other people in my life that they were not very kind. They hurt me in ways more than one. And I'm not saying I got physically abused, but sometimes mildly. I know there are plenty of people out there who get their ass beaten by their husbands or their wives, and they just sit there and they take it, and then they have all this trauma and this and this and that. I will never go as far to say my experiences were anything close to that. I won't ever have the story of, well, he beat me half to death in the snow and I almost died, and then I came crawling back for another decade of abuse. I don't have those kinds of stories to tell. I only have mine. But as a kid, seeing these things and going through them, it really fucks with you, and it sets the path for how you're gonna go. So I always say, if it wasn't for her, I would be a totally different person. I wouldn't know what anxiety is. I would have never thought about suicide or cutting myself. I would have never been this unhappy. And even though I'm going through a rough time now, it would have been better because I would have had better coping skills, because I wouldn't have let myself get this far if it wasn't for her. And the her I'm talking about is my person. We all have our people. And I won't disclose that right now, because I think that would make a great other video. Because I have a lot to say about my person. And I hope she sees it. And I hope it makes her cry. And I know that sounds mean and harsh, but after what she did to me and how she made me feel, I would not feel bad for her. Considering she is the most selfish, controlling, narcissistic mentalist I have ever come across. I have met a couple people who are similar to her. But, she has experience. She takes the cake. Anyway, but us people have our person, our her, They have this person who welcomes you with open arms, and they sit there and they pretend like they love you, they pretend like they care, they pretend you're having a great time, and they pretend life is well, until they have you in a place where you're comfortable, and where you feel like you're at home, like you're wanted, and like they're the only one that can do it for you, And then slowly and little by little, they'll let out their colors, and this, with my person, it only took not that long, because she helped, Well, no, I'm not going to say raise me. She didn't do crap. But she was there for my childhood. And I knew her for a long time. And I feel like over time to then, when I got really close to her, she was slowly digging her claws in. And that's how a lot of people are. But all of a sudden, it had just changed. It wasn't the same. It was something completely different, something completely just more painful, I guess. But there are other people who take even longer, like my stepdad. He was really nice to my mom. I was a bratty kid, I'll admit it. I did not like him for a really long time. But over the years, it just got worse and worse, to the point of, at their end of their relationship, after a decade almost, and 2 kids of their own, it was the daily fights, the yelling, the threatening. One point earlier on into their relationship, he kind of let a spark of himself show, where he got physically violent with my mother, but it never got too bad. And he learned his lesson, because he went to jail, and he did not like that. But he never let himself get to a certain point, which, thank God, but you always had to worry. Because he was the type of person that you would never know what he was capable of. And he was such a compulsive liar and a fake person that you didn't know what to believe either. You know, he'd have stories and stuff because he was Hispanic and he was originally from Mexico. I won't say exactly where, but that's where he was originally from with his family, and then he came over here to start his life, and he was just a kid, you know. I think he was 18, 17 maybe. But he'll go on and he'll tell you stories about his first wife and how shitty she was, and, you know, how he's just this great, fantastic person who took his daughter and all this stuff. But after that decade of really getting to know him and seeing how much he lied, you would have never known. I mean, for all we know, he could have came over here because he murdered 3 people and was exiled from Mexico. I mean, maybe they have a warrant out for his arrest that's not big enough to show nationally. Like, I have no idea. And then, you know, 10 years later, you know, the constant fights and just... I can do an episode on people like him, too. There's a lot of stories to tell. I mean, I have them backed up for days. And I know I'm supposed to be talking about PTSD and anxiety right now and all those things. But you can see how I kind of spiral. Because of my own anxiety and depression, you'll notice that a lot in my videos. How I'll be going on for one topic and I'll just talk about things and talk about things and talk about things, and then they'll evolve into stories about myself and my experiences. That's why I wanted to make this channel. It's because I do that. And unlike other people, I'm not doing multiple takes on this, you know. First try, first go, here you are. The only thing I am is putting some copyright-free music in the background so you guys don't have to hear too much silence. But that's, you know, that's me. It's my anxiety. I hope this helps some of you understand, and I hope you guys realize that it's not for everybody. It's not smiles and rainbows and beers in the backyard with your favorite Uncle Jimmy, you know. I hope you know that there's going to be people all around you who are suffering from things, and it's going to be really hard to spot them. But when you do, you can't unsee it. You know, once you spot that person, that one person, it might be a coworker. It might be somebody within your family. It might be your own child or your mother. Or maybe this will bring up something inside of yourself that you didn't realize that was what it was and that's how you felt. Maybe you'll reconcile with some of the things that I'm saying. And maybe you'll see that it's not just me. And it's not just this label we put on things. I know I'm going to label a lot of these things, but sometimes labels just do not do these feelings justice. Because if I walked in to any kind of psychiatrist or doctor's office, they would probably tell me I have one of everything and prescribe me with a bunch of medications to take, and a lot of those medications and their side effects are suicide and anxiety, you know, all the things you're trying to stop. That's why I would never label myself with anything. Some of you are going to be firm believers on labels and firm believers of the medical field and everything, and that's fine, as long as you think you're doing what's best for you. That's what this is all about. That's what this is. This is trying to identify and connect so that you can maybe try to fix what you have, or not necessarily fix. maybe one day. But for now, try to build new coping mechanisms or do things to help yourself. And for a lot of people, that is going to be the most difficult thing that I could ever say on this channel. Like I've said before, I've been doing this for 4 years, and I'm still struggling. And some days it's just as bad as back when I was a kid. Some days I feel like if I would have tried a little bit harder in my attempt, that it would be better for everybody, because then I wouldn't be feeling the way I feel, and I wouldn't be hurting the people around me because I cannot cope with the way I feel, and then I blow up sometimes. But I know that's not right, and I know that's not right to think. It's just a thought. And what can you do with thoughts other than talk about them? So here I am. You guys get to listen to me, ramble on about feelings and all these things. But I hope you guys enjoy, and I hope you guys take some of what I say to heart, even if it is just a fragment, or even if you're not listening, because this is helping me. Little by little, this is getting easier to talk about. And secretly, I hope that the right people hear it so that they can understand me a little bit better. Because this is so hard to do alone. I got nobody. At this point in my life, I've had so many bad people walk through and over and stomped on me and everything that I cut them all off, and I don't have a lot of people left. There weren't too many good people that I had in my life already. And I'm just a kid. The majority of my family, that was my people, And then it's really hard, when the majority of your group, your family, your people are the people who are destroying you. I had 2 people within my family who I knew I could rely on and trust. There were only 2 people who actually wanted to help. And that was my grandfather and my mother. They were the only people who took me seriously. And that has something to say for some of the people out there. You cannot rag on people and drag them through the mud and then smile and pretend like everything's okay. Because it's not. The way you made them feel, it's just not okay. There's too much of it, because it wasn't just my family, and it might just not be yours. It might be your friends, maybe the person who you thought was your best friend. If you take a really good look at them and see the things they do, you might rethink them being your friend. Like me, I thought I had met my best friend, but she was just using me to make herself feel better. And she was using me to pay for her things and drive her around. And that was her deal. And then some of the other friends that I've had in the past, I was at a point where I kind of knew, so I just let them go. And I haven't talked to them since. But lately I've been making big changes where I cut out all my people. I cut out the majority of my family, other than my grandfather and my mother. Sorry, not the majority. Pretty much all of my family. And I don't really have any friends. I have coworkers who are nice that I'm kind of close with. Other than that, I have my dog, and that's it. I don't really have people. I don't have anybody to talk to. I don't have counselors, or anything else. That's why I'm here, because I'm hoping to not only spread awareness and all the other fantastic things, but I'm hoping that somehow deep down inside this helps me too. Or who knows, maybe that's the anxiety speaking. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time and getting this far. Thank you for hearing me out. If I don't hear from you or see you tomorrow, have a good night, good morning, and goodbye.